morning, everyone. That's right. It is a morning edition, a Tuesday edition of On Cue. Rich Quinones is here. Our good friend Lloyd Vance jumping on early and often. Yes, on this Tuesday, we had to shuffle things around. So it is I guess you can say, a Tuesday AM edition of On Cue. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Lloyd Vance, our good friend and host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 FM, SR 1029 Sports Radio does a great job. Also, Coastal Sports Digital Network, kind enough to join us on a Tuesday on this already the 16th of September 2025. And I can see the messages coming in already. Everyone wants to know I'm shuffling. No. Don't worry about it. Back in the saddle, regular time on a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday. Had to move some stuff, got some games to call, and Lloyd was kind enough to adjust his schedule on the fly as 2 weeks in the NFL season are in the books, my good friend. And how are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's a roller coaster already, Q, but I'm enjoying it. It's a lot of surprises, some good games, and some good performances.
Yeah, and listen, I thought last night we'll kind of work our way backwards. Last night, Monday Night Football, the double dip, and I had again getting off the air Monday on the show. I love the Chargers, the second game, and I like Tampa Bay outright. The Bucs made it a little more difficult on themselves, but the story to me is Baker Mayfield. His numbers are just outstanding. It kind of speaks to a couple years ago. Everyone said this guy was a bad teammate issue in the locker room in Cleveland. Maybe it's just the organization, right? I mean, he has found a place right now in the NFL, jettisoned from the Browns after the injury, bouncing around a little bit, and then having that Monday night win with the Rams, and then finally turning around and having an opportunity to play with Tampa Bay and just cashing in. Made the plays late last night, especially with his legs. That's a nice dramatic win by the Bucs. Right now, it's better to be lucky than good. At times, they're 2-0, and the Texans, offensively, they got some issues. They are 0-2. But what did you see last night from Tampa Bay in that dramatic win late on Monday Night Football? And again, the Bucs win it 20-19 over the Texans.
Yeah, Q, what you're seeing is a team that has some veteran leadership, particularly in Todd Bowles. He's doing a good job keeping this group together. Starting out 2-0 for the fourth straight year. They've won the division over and over again. And, it doesn't look like it's going to change. Carolina's struggling. The Saints don't look like they're going to be anything. And Atlanta, we'll see about them. So it's a two-team race in that division. And what you like about Baker is he just never says die. It was interesting. He gets knocked up in the air. He jumps up and gets in the face to the defender. You don't want to see that all the time, but it just shows you the toughness. And this guy's been on a roller coaster of his career.
Yeah, and listen, he's just a good quarterback. Like he's a solid quarterback that just constantly makes plays, and I think there's something to be said about his toughness. I mean, you want to take a guy like that every day of the week. And look, last night you saw it again. Making plays. I look at this. I'm a little worried. I talked about this last week regarding the Houston Texans. They fall to 0-2, and the way the Colts and Daniel Jones have been playing, you start to think, okay, the Colts have an opportunity to win that division, the AFC South. But, this Texans team, I can't figure them out. The offense has been absolutely anemic, to be quite honest with you. And Stroud didn't play particularly well. They couldn't run the ball last night. You take away his 27, Chubb really didn't do anything aside from when Buck turned around and said they haven't been able to run. He goes off tackle off the right side for that 25-yard touchdown run. You take those yards away, you're talking about 60-something yards on the ground. Stroud just barely cracking 200. Tampa was able to blitz and get to him defensively. What's going on with the Texans right now?
Yeah, Keith, you made a lot of good points there in terms of the Texans. They won the division the last 2 years at 10-7, and I think everybody's kind of caught up with them. And the biggest thing, Q, is their offensive line. They traded Laremy Tunsil. They tried to go in the draft and clean some things up, but that line is just not getting any protection. They're not running it effectively. And you're right, Nick Chubb, yeah, veteran type of guy, but you're just not sure how much is left in the tank. And C.J. Stroud, he missed a lot of throws, Q. A couple high ones in the end zone where they possibly could have had a touchdown. And defensively, yeah, they have Anderson and Stingley Jr. They have some names there, but teams are able to move the football on them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Don't forget, On Cue is brought to you by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Use BYP20 for the promo, and you can save now on your first purchase, on your first order, as we like to say. And then you've got the double dip. And I mean, look, I like the Chargers. You know that. I loved them in that spot last night. I'm not as high on the Raiders as most. As soon as we start to, wax poetic and give respect to a quarterback like Geno Smith, last night he was just absolutely, he was horrible. He was atrocious. I mean, the three picks, he had to sling it 43 times. That's again another team that couldn't run the football. The offensive line did not hold up. They mustered 9 points. Give the Chargers credit. Herbert efficient, and more importantly, again, they pretty much kept them upright. They couldn't run the ball, but when you needed a couple big plays, they were able to punch it in, and they get the 20-9 win. They're 2-0, and the Raiders are 1-1. But I'm starting to think right now. We'll get to Brady in the booth in a moment. Geno Smith. We talked a little bit about potential game ball in week 1, and then he comes back and he gives you that we're all too familiar Geno Smith effort.
Yeah, Q. And, you thought with John Spytek coming in there as general manager, Pete Carroll coming and bring that veteran leadership at the head coaching position, this team would perform better. And they did play well against the Patriots week 1, but you're right. It was a total no-show, especially offensively for the Raiders. And Geno was struggling. He was seeing ghosts out there, Q. He's backpedaling all day. I remember on a 4th down, he threw the ball away, didn't even try to make a play. And then it was just an ugly performance, 3 interceptions. And you're wondering where the Raiders are going to go. Bowers gave it a go, but you could see the knee injury clearly affected him. And defensively, it's a bunch of retreads,
Yep.
Jamal's out there
Yep.
trying to make
Yep.
plays at middle linebacker, Jamal Adams, former safety. And other than Max Crosby, they really don't have any teeth on that defense.
What did you make of Brady in the booth, right? So there's been a lot of kind of discourse over the last year about his role, the fairness of Tom Brady's role with Fox, obviously the number one analyst. Now he's also simultaneously serving as minority owner of the Raiders. You saw last night, Schrager mentioned it during the broadcast. Here we go. Now I know he's going to do the flag football stuff. I get it. He was on camera, very visible last night. We know that if you go back, when he became minority owner of the Raiders, he was not allowed to talk to coaches, players during the meeting. Even though he's allowed in those meetings, he's still not allowed to attend and observe practices. They made an exception for him to watch Eagles Kansas City Chiefs practice ahead of the Super Bowl. But again, you got to adhere to certain restrictions or several restrictions that other broadcasters don't. And I think in January, the AP had an interview with Fox Sports' president and production of operations, Brad Zager, and he basically said, hey, man, there's no conflict of interest. It's questioning his professionalism and integrity. It's ridiculous. The reason I bring all this up is because we learned that he talks a lot with Carroll and also Chip Kelly multiple times during the week. So that leads me to believe he's got a lot more hands on. And look, I get it, rightfully so. I mean, he's friggin' Tom Brady. I mean, look at his resume, right? In the body of work, Hall of Fame quarterback, the GOAT, 1,000 Super Bowl wins, MVPs. I mean, hey, you're going to pick his brain, right? But I'm wondering, is this kind of murky waters we're treading here?
Yeah, it's too much, Q. And I know he still wants to get that big paycheck for being a broadcaster and paid like the number one guy.
Yeah.
We won't get into whether he is or not, but I don't think he is. But he's paid that way, and he still wants to have that job. And then in terms of, yes, he's very involved. But the thing is, I talked to some folks, and Mark Davis once made abundantly clear he is the owner of the team. So Tom Brady has bought a piece of it, but Mark Davis is making the calls, and we'll see how this all shakes out, Q. I think in the end it may be a mess because, he's kind of meddlesome. He's sticking his nose in there, and Pete Carroll, veteran guy, does he really want to hear from him? We know about Chip Kelly in terms of how well he listens, from his Eagles days, and it's just a matter of time for this thing blows up. So tough loss for them, and we'll see how they regroup. But Geno Smith may not be a big future for him in terms of being a starting quarterback.
No. All right. So we had the Colts outright against Miami. Daniel Jones playing really well. There's something to be said about coaching at the end, and I'm not going to sit there and say give him 4 years of 40 million, but he's playing well, and it's unfortunate for Denver because you get flagged for that leverage call, and that's a tough call to be quite honest. It's rarely called, but when it's called, it's called. But the problem I have is the fashion in which they called it late in the game. You're taking a long field goal away, you're chipping off 15 yards, you're making it a more makeable field goal. The Colts get the win at the gun. They move to 2-0 with the dramatic win over the Denver Broncos. I'm a little, troublesome with Bo Nix. Decision making, couple bad picks, but man, the story of the season right now, the Colts 2-0, as I mentioned, 29-28 over Denver. What's impressed you the most about the Colts and Daniel Jones? And do you believe it does have to do with a change of scenery and coaching?
Well, it's a situation. He may be this season Sam Darnold. Everything's kind of coming together at the right time for
Mm.
them. You see how that penalty, it's almost like Kansas City last year. They're finding ways to win, and this is good for a Colts team that we know is kind of struggling to find an identity. Steichen is on a hot seat. Unfortunately, their owner passed away, and they're trying to figure out some things there. But yeah, quality win for them. And when you look at the Colts, they have a running game with Taylor. They have Pittman. Warren's come along at the tight end position, and defensively, very underrated. A lot of people talk about Franklin, Buckner, but there's some other pieces on that defense. So I think Colts good win. And now we'll see as we start moving towards the second quarter of the season if they're for real or not.
Yeah, that's a great quote, by the way, that Daniel Jones might be the season's Sam Darnold. You're right. I mean, it could be just, you get these cast offs, change of scenery with some of these guys, right? I mean, it's fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. I mean, look, you know this. I never not liked Daniel Jones. It was just one of these situations where I felt he needed a change of scenery and he shouldn't have been the quarterback anymore in New York. And it's nice to see him kind of starting to evolve a little bit as a quarterback in the NFL. Again, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on SR 1029 FM. The Game, kind enough to join me. You catch him every Monday night, 8 to 9. Does a fantastic job at Lloyd Vance. A little Tuesday morning edition, rapid fire of On Cue. We are powered by our wonderful friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. And don't forget, get ready with tea and Three Brooks Bourbon. All right, as we keep working our way backwards, let's get into this Giants and this Dallas mess because I've said it over, and over, and I feel like I keep kind of banging that drum with some of the Giant fans that just don't get it. The worst thing to happen was Russell Wilson go out and throw for over 450 yards because all that does is keep Jackson Dart on the sidelines. And then as great as Russell Wilson played, he still had the two boneheaded plays in overtime. Like, watching that game as a Giant fan, they would find a way to foul it up. And the Dallas Cowboys' best weapon is their kicker. So I don't like, listen, defensively, the scheme was horrible late in that game, playing off the ball and off coverage and that prevent defense. I thought offensively, look, they played better, but they're supposed to make their mark with all the moves they made in the offseason with the defense, right? And then drafting Carter and making a stop. And the last time defensively the Giants made a stop was probably back in 2011. It's like been well over a decade. And that's a house of horrors in Dallas. They had that game right there. It's a disheartening and gut punch loss. I still believe that the DC, Kafka, obviously the offensive coordinator calling the plays, Kafka and Brian Daboll, I think they need to clean house. I think they, that defense, I think that's an absolute disgrace. Like, you cannot, for the life of me, tell me that you're going to play that type of coverage. Like Shane Bowen, I crushed Martindale, but let's be honest. I mean, he's a horrible defensive coordinator. Horrible defensive coordinator, especially the way they played coverage late. I mean, for a fact in the NFL with that kickoff rule and having plenty of time and a kicker, a kicker like Aubrey, that you give up 10, 15 yards, you give up 5, 10 yards, that's going to make all the difference in the world. So he drills a 64-yarder in regulation as time expires, and then basically he's a chip shot from 46, and the Cowboys win at 40-37. The Giants are 0-2 again for the 10th time in 13 years. So it's like, come on, man. Enough is enough already.
Yeah, Q, it's like a broken record. It's unfortunate. Who would have thought we'd be talking about 77 total points and over 800 passing yards between Dallas and the Giants? But The thing is, Dak kind of has their number. I mean, he's won 13 straight, I think, against New York, something like that, and he's they put up big numbers, and you did think the game was over. So Neighbors, that was a great catch and throw, going deep, but they just couldn't stop him. So it was back and forth action, fun to watch. For me as somebody that didn't have a horse in the race, I kind of enjoyed just watching the offense. But yeah, they do need some more defense. They drafted a lot this offseason in terms of their defense, and it's not gotten better. I just think Daboll it's the
He's
end
done.
is near. It's near. Him and Joe Shane, they're going to be looking for new jobs soon.
Yeah,
So
but how do you know this? You played the sport. You've covered the sport. You know the sport. Like you're playing guys like off the ball. The second along, it was just I don't get it. Like it's so frustrating to watch because you're supposed to bring in these defensive players to make plays, and they just have not made plays.
yeah, they're not making plays, and to Dallas's credit, they knew Aubrey could save their bacon, and that 64-yard. I mean, that thing was good from 70. It hit the wall 64 yards out, and
I mean, imagine having Thibodeau, Carter, Burns, Dexter Lawrence, some really nice players, and not realizing how to use them or utilize them. Look, Kansas City, we're going to get into. Kansas City loses to the Eagles. They've got their issues. They're 0-2. They play the Giants on Sunday Night Football. That's the Giants' home opener. If the Giants give up 35 or they lose in the fashion in which they lost to Dallas, where he just plays prevent defense, and they fall to 0-3, how do you not fire the guy?
yeah, it's if that game goes the way I think it probably will, because let's face it, Kansas City's angry. They need to win very badly, and they're coming up to New York, and the Giants just don't seem to have much teeth. So yeah, it could be very ugly for Daboll. He was on a hot seat to begin with the season, and it's not getting any better.
No, speaking of the Chiefs, and again, that was kind of a snooze fest against the Eagles, and the Eagles offensively really didn't do much. But hey, a win is a win in the NFL. I don't care. Like we can talk about the stats, we can talk about the numbers, who made the plays, who didn't make the plays. At the end of the day, all you need to do is make a couple more plays than the opposition, especially if the offense is struggling, if the defense is struggling. Good teams turn into great teams when they do that. We know the Eagles maybe aren't playing like a great team at this moment, only 2 weeks in, but we also know their pedigree. It's a defending Super Bowl champ, and it got a little salty. It got a little chippy. I'm more concerned with the Kansas City Chiefs, to be quite honest. I think the run is over. I really do. I think the run is over. They can't run the football. They don't have any weapons, putting a lot of pressure on Mahomes. Their defense is at times a little suspect. And then you get the nonsense with Travis Kelce. Like, come on, man, catch the friggin' football. It's right in your midst. So at 0-2, do you believe the Chiefs will figure it out? Or do you see the pronounced issues like I do?
Q, the whole time watching that game, I was like, oh, Rich Q, he predicted this in our first show. We were talking, making predictions for the season, and they just do not look right, Q. And it's looking like, yeah, the Chargers could win that division. You have the Raiders at 1-1; they're ahead of them. And Denver's playing some good ball defensively, and they could be 2-0, but they're 1-1. So it's a situation where they're in trouble. They're trying to hold on. I think not having Rashee Rice is huge for them. We know they still have 4 more weeks without him. Maybe Xavier Worthy can come out there. They just do not have any playmakers in terms of that offense. Patrick Mahomes, it's like his younger days. He's putting on a Superman cape. I mean, he led them in terms of rushing, 7 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown. But you don't want him taking the hits that he is. And let's face it, that interception, you got to put it on Kelce. He's got to catch that football. And he not only doesn't catch it, he throws it up in the air, and it's in the red zone. And that turned the game because, like you were saying, it was pretty much a boring game. There were 8 punts in this game, Q. So it was a game breaker, and the Eagles took advantage of it, and they enjoyed having Jalen Carter back.
Listen, that's a great point you bring up on Mahomes, right? Because that's not good when he's the leading rusher. He's got 123 yards. Now, you love it from a player prop standpoint, but considering that they now have a design run call for Mahomes, that's never a good thing. And when did we not hear Isaiah Pacheco is going to have that revenge tour, right? I mean, he was this kind of reliable. He's not a reliable every down back. He's just not. And again, man, you just running hard and running with power are not the same thing, right? And then the other, listen, people don't want to talk about this, but your margin of error has basically, I don't want to say it's dissipated. It's starting to erode a little bit, meaning that, they had the talent to win the game, but they don't have the talent enough or the talent to overcome mistakes enough, if that makes sense, right? There, you can't, you can't afford Kansas City in years past maybe can turn the ball over near the red zone, but they can't do that anymore. They're just not that talented of a team. They're not that good. They had the talent to win it, but they can't overcome the mistakes. Now, defensively, they might figure it out. Again, we'll see, but I still think right now 0-2. Um, they don't have the same luck that we've seen in years past. Mahomes is wearing the Superman cape. They've got some issues. They've got some injuries. They're dealing with the suspensions. Kelsey's looking older and frustrated. They can't run the football. And I'm telling you, it's one of the main reasons going into the season that I just saw that this team was leaking oil. And I didn't like them coming out of the AFC West. You know that. They're probably going to be a playoff team, maybe a wild card team. They might be one and done, but they need to steady the waters. And if they were to go out and lose to the Giants, and a lot of people, I'm starting to see money on the Giants, and that number at 6.5, it's going to creep up to 7. And if they lose to the Giants, I mean, think about this: 0-3 with the Ravens, tough game. Jacksonville, you never know. Lions, you don't know. What if this team's 1-4, 1-5 out of the gate? You're going to tell me that it's not going to be panic time in Kansas City, or are you just going to basically write this year off and say it happens after the great run that they had?
No, it'll be a national story, and it'll be the epic collapse of this team. And people will talk about how the Eagles had the blueprint in the Super Bowl, and everybody kind of is piled on it. And everybody's going to have their excuses for them if they get to that point. Even now, the offensive line's patchwork. Taylor has a lot of penalties on that line, and he needs some playmakers to step up. And defensively, they're allowing teams to move the football. The Eagles, they had a ton of success in terms of getting first downs, keeping the clock moving. They could not get a stop the Chiefs when it mattered most. So a lot of mistakes for them, a lot to clean up, and we'll see if they get to 0-3. We know 0-3 is not good because only 6 teams since 1980 have come back from that to make the playoffs.
What did you make of what was they were on their 35 on 4th and 1, and the Eagles got to stop? I mean, you're talking 4th and 1, your own territory, first possession of the second half. Reed calls a run up the middle for Kareem Hunt. I know you're talking about being aggressive, and defensively, I guess maybe he's thinking, well, we held the Eagles to what, 94, 95 net passing yards. So again, we can be aggressive on defense. That's okay, but that's a little too overly aggressive offensively, right? I mean, I think his comments afterwards is we want to dial some things up differently at the end of the day, and obviously there were plays that they could have called. I don't know, man. That's a 10-10 game, and you want to give the momentum to the Eagles.
Yeah, Q, past success has clouded Reed's judgment, and it's a situation where he thinks, okay, we can get it done. We're the Chiefs, and let's not forget, last year they won. They're 11-0 in one-score games, and they always found a way. But this year, it just seems to be different, and you can point to, the offensive line and
Yeah.
just not enough playmakers, et cetera. But they're just not getting it done. And yeah, I thought that was overly aggressive. Not a good time for it. And the Eagles took advantage of it. Not a pretty win by the Eagles, but a win's a win in their stack of W's.
Yeah, speaking of stacking W's, right? All of a sudden, you got the Rams. They're 2-0 defensively. You go on the road, you shut down Ward, who made a couple plays, but there's going to be growing pains there. Stafford efficient. They put up 33. I look at the Rams. I'm not 100% sold on them just yet. I think Green Bay's right there with the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC. But again, you go on the road, you get the win. And I'm just pulling up the Rams schedule coming up. They've got that rematch against the Eagles, and that's a game on the road. They get them this weekend. That's going to be a tough out, making that trek. Then they have the Colts, the 49ers starting to get a little juice. You got the Ravens. So I think we're going to see where the Rams are over the next several weeks.
Correct, Q. And we know it's a week-to-week league, and it was close game, 13-10 at the half.
Yeah.
They turned it around with Stafford, and they started making plays. Puka Nacua had a big rushing touchdown. And this is going to be a good test for the Rams coming into Philadelphia. Obviously, they want revenge from that divisional round game. The weather will be a lot better. But the Eagles are a tough out, especially in Philadelphia. So it's going to be an interesting game. Looking forward to it. And yeah, we've always said the NFC West is up for grabs. And Purdy's injury is going to be something we need to watch with the Niners, how that's going to affect this division.
Uh, are are the Packers the most complete team? I know it's only 2 weeks, but let's overreact in the NFC right now.
I put them with the Eagles, 1A and 1B right now. They're on a collision course. I know they play in a couple weeks. They're going to play in week 10, and so that's going to be an exciting game to see how both of them get there. But with Micah Parsons, the amount of pressure that they're getting and the guys in the back and are able to make plays, yeah, they're a complete team. But you want to see how these injuries in terms of the receivers are going to affect this team.
Yeah, and that's also the key. And the injuries are all across the board in the NFL. We'll get to it. Washington dealing with the Daniels situation. Cincinnati gets that win over Jacksonville 31-27. They lose Joe Burrow. He's going to be out for 3 weeks. So you've got Carson Wentz and who's the backup?
Browning. How about
There
that?
you go. Jake Browning, from State Farm this weekend. I feel bad for Joe Burrow because I think he's an unbelievable talent. You could have made the case he was the MVP last year. I feel also, though, when do we start having the conversation? Like, sometimes you can just have bad luck. And bad luck just means you can't get out of your own way or you deal with injuries. And this kid's 28. I feel as though did Cincinnati mismanage this kid's career thus far, or is he just injury prone? Right, 3 major injuries in 6 NFL seasons. Or is the truth somewhere in between?
Yeah, the truth somewhere in between. And Q, but you wonder is he almost getting like an Andrew Luck where he's so beat up that he's not going to be effective
I was thinking
anymore?
that.
And it seems every other year or every 2 years, Q, he has one of these major injuries. And you always got to point to their offensive line. They've had a lot of
Agree.
problems. It's always been patchwork. He's taken a lot of hits. And we always say about the Bengals and their front office, how they're not designing the team the right way. And it is tough for him. So, yeah, there is some mixed management there. But he does have Jamar Chase. He does have Higgins. Brown's a pretty solid running back. So, we'll see how they kind of rebound from this. But, yeah, that's a huge injury, and we'll see how long it's going to take him to come back from that toe injury.
Turf toe, right? So they're saying at least 3 months, third time in 6 seasons, right? And you mentioned that underwhelming offensive line. That's supposed to protect the franchise quarterback, right? Like, most franchises value the quarterback's protection to an extreme degree. And you got one of the best players in the league, and now all of a sudden you're going to get subpar quarterback play because your offensive line can't do the job because you're not investing in the offensive line. And that's the problem, right? I mean, it's just, you're giving up sacks, you're giving up pressures, you're getting, he's taking a lot of hits. It's just, man, it's not good. And we always talk about this franchise being cheap and where you're going to invest, where you're going to invest. I also believe this puts the head coach right in the crosshairs. I really do.
Yeah,
I really do, because
yeah.
it's Zach Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah, and any other team you say, yeah, but Mike Brown and I don't think he'd want to pay 2 coaches. So, he's stuck around there. He got him to a Super Bowl, but yeah, you got to wonder if that window's closing on him. And it's going to be up to Brown and Duke Tobin, their GM, to see how they kind of fix this situation.
Here's a number. In 2024, Burrow had by far the most attempts on passes that took fewer than 2.5 seconds after the snap, with 397. Mahomes ranked second with 352. 2023, fewer overall Joe Burrow dropbacks because he had that wrist injury that ended the season. Lack of protection, again, still led the NFL in percentage of quick throw dropbacks at 63.9%. So get the friggin' ball out fast. Now, Cincinnati, as you said, maybe they do have enough offense to kind of carry them over the next couple weeks. And by the way, you had some bad, questionable flags in that game too, in that Jacksonville loss to Cincinnati 31-27. We talked a little bit about a team struggling offensively. I would memo to Ben Johnson, right? Don't poke the bear. And the Lions, not only do they rout them, but they basically ran it up. Dan Campbell's like, I'm going to make a statement here. 52 points later, and the Bears are the Bears. They got absolutely lambasted by Detroit, 52-21.
Yeah, they took the guns to him, and it was a situation where it was good Jared Goff week. This guy, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 3 of those touchdowns, and they piled up 25 first
Mm.
downs, 511 total yards in this game. So, yeah, Campbell wanted to say, okay, look, I'm still in charge here. The old Marion Rivera, who's your dad? You know what I mean? So it's a situation where Ben Johnson, he just doesn't have the team to compete with them right now, and it's going to be a long struggle this season for them. They lost Jalen Johnson, their very good corner, to a groin injury, and I just don't see that changing for Chicago much because Caleb Williams looking extremely tentative in a pocket, not making the right throws, and Johnson's getting frustrated with him. So it's going to be interesting there.
Listen, a lot of people were high on the Bears. I never was. Everyone, oh, they're going to turn around and here you go. I mean, look at their backup situation. If they go to bench them, right? They got the kid Tyson Bagent and they got Case Keenum. I mentioned this yesterday and I got hammered with Burrow being out. You know, if you're the Giants, would you even consider calling Cincinnati and saying, hey, you want Russ Wilson? Or if you're Atlanta, would you consider calling Cincinnati and saying you want Kirk Cousins? Just to whether, obviously viable options, or you think they're fine where they're at, just weather the storm over the next couple months.
Yeah, Q. Jake Browning, he is who he is. He's a backup. He's a journeyman type of guy. And when you look at the schedule coming up, um, the Vikings pretty tough at Denver, Detroit, at Green Bay, Pittsburgh, and the Jets. I mean, some of those have some very good defenses, and it may be a situation where they say, okay, we cannot win with this guy. We may have to go in another direction. And yeah, Kirk Cousins, he's sitting down there. They obviously Atlanta has moved on from him,
Yep.
and the Giants, yeah, they would be smart to get Dart in there. I mean, they brought him in for what, 3 plays to hand the football
Which
along.
was horrible when Russ was actually cooking a little bit.
Yeah. And so maybe, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, maybe send one of those guys over there. So Cincinnati's in the mix. They're happy they did not start 0-3 again. At 2-0, they have a very good chance of making the playoffs. We know it's about 64% or so when you start 2-0. Yeah, why not make a change if needed?
Cardinals got the win over the Panthers 27-22. The Ravens, we knew they were going to cover the nut over the Browns 41-17. I don't know how much stock you put in the story that the Ravens wanted to draft Shedeur Sanders, and he said, no, 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 no. At this point, I'm kind of over it. They're going to have a dismal season. Seattle got the win over the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers bitching, griping about receivers running wrong routes. You got players not even, fundamentally ready, and they're head in the game with that kickoff debacle for the Steelers. I thought the Bills, everyone was saying it's a letdown. I knew they were going to go out, take care of the Jets. Justin Fields has that really nice opening day. Then, you don't know if he's dealing with a concussion. They put up 10 points and they lose by 20 to Buffalo. But the Bills quietly 2-0.
Yeah, Q, what a difference a week makes for the Jets. Everybody was talking about, wow, they were actually competitive. And Fields gets that concussion. Breece Hall did not do much in this game. And the Bills are business-like in this one, Q. James Cook played very well for them, and Josh Allen did what he needed to do. And their defense is coming along. So good win for them in terms of Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. Bad loss for them. They were home favorite. Seattle went in there. Obviously, the Caleb Johnson muff and then not picking it up. That was a huge play in this game, but you just expect more for them. So, still a lot of movement, but a lot of those teams are 1-1, and we'll see where they go from here.
Where are you at right now with Miami? I mean, look, they give up 33 points. Tua regressed. Hill's starting to, he's complaining more and more. McDaniel just looks like, an absolute dead man walking. Like, he looks like the guy that's been written up several times and he's waiting to either get suspended or get fired. Like, he just does not care anymore, it seems.
Yeah, they're a team. I think Miami, this season is going to get even longer for them. And it's a situation where they're not running the football well. They're another team. Their offensive line is a mess. Tua, let's face it, his days as a starter, I think, are numbered. He's just not performing effectively, and he has all those shiny toy weapons out there. Tariq Hill and
That's a
Watt,
horrible contract. That's,
and
I mean, it looks like a bad, and I was all for it, by the way.
they can't get out. They can get out of it, but it's going to be like what Denver did with Russell Wilson. They're going to have to eat a lot of money on that thing. And then defensively, they have Phillips and not much else on that defense. So I think it's going to be a long struggle of a season for Miami, and they're in a tough division. They got the Bills in there, and that's where they're playing Thursday night. I think that could get ugly pretty quick in that game. Maybe they get beat the Jets the next week. They're at Carolina. That could be winnable. And then they have the Chargers. So some winnable games there, but they have a lot to clean up in Miami. And you're right, McDaniel, we talked about him being on a hot seat beginning of the season, him and Daboll, and it's even gotten hotter.
Well, how about the fact that you had a plane over the stadium over Hard Rock that read fire, Greer fire McDaniel, the GM, Chris Greer, and obviously the head coach. And McDaniel responds, I was coaching and calling a football game. I wasn't spending my time considering what the fans were doing at all. Fans want their team to win. So I figured that if we win football games, I don't think it's personal. I think they want to win, and so do I. Like, on the surface, it actually is a rational take and makes sense. But dude, you don't say it out loud. Like, you know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like,
Right. You're supposed to act like you don't care and everything. And
exactly.
I remember outside NovaCare, same type of situation with, Chip Kelly and all that stuff. And they sent the guy away. But anytime you see fans doing that type of activity, it's not good. And it just shows you the atmosphere is kind of toxic. So, yeah, that team, it's just going to get ugly for them this season, I believe.
I mean, does he get fired mid-season?
There's a distinct chance when you look at their schedule's pretty tough. I went through the games and if you have some ugly, embarrassing losses, like this is a national game on Thursday. If they play bad,
Against the Bills.
yeah, Stephen Ross is getting a little older. I talked about that in the past. Maybe he's getting impatient there. Chris Greer, McDaniel, they were the darlings of the league a couple of years ago when they made the playoffs and won all those games. But I just not have been the same since they lost to Kansas City in that playoff game.
Yeah, and they couldn't run the football, remember? I mean, and they also spit the bit. They had a chance to host that game and had to go on the road and couldn't run.
Yeah, agreed. And they're not built properly. As we move along the season, you're like, oh, the architects of these teams that are not playing well, they have just not done a good job, whether it's the draft, free agency, and their rosters just aren't good enough.
Um, I feel as though there's a disconnect with the quarterback and wide receiver. Like, everywhere, look, Hill's a great player, but he always causing nonsense everywhere he goes. And he got frustrated, right? He wants his catches, he wants his targets, he wants his receptions, he wants to get in the end zone. And there were a couple times that Tua, like Mahomes, missed his safety valve, and Kelsey, and now in Hill. It is, why do you think Tua's regressing? Is it the hits? Is it, again, all the concussions? Is it the wear and tear? Is he skittish in the pocket? It's maybe it was just smoke and mirrors because they were able to run it and open it up a couple years ago, and he put up these gaudy numbers. Like, he doesn't sound like a confident quarterback right now. And I don't see this team, by the way, they're 12 and a half point dogs on Thursday night to Buffalo on the road. That game might get ugly, but you want to play Buffalo now in Buffalo instead of November, December, January. But look, starting 0-2, it's not a death sentence, but man, it's, we're letting you know that if the governor doesn't call by 12, you're pretty much shit out of luck. So it's like, do you see a quarterback that just lacks confidence, or all the hits have taken a toll?
Yeah, Q, it's a couple things. And I think when he was being scouted, a lot of people said this. He just was not a top line quarterback in terms of his arm strength and his decision making. It was too easy at Alabama. He had all those high 5 stars around him, and these guys are wide open. Well, now he has contested throws in the NFL, and he can't get it done. And then you talk about that offensive line. Armstead retired. It's just been patchwork the whole time down there. They can't run the football to kind of take some pressure off of him. And then he's just not performing well enough. And I think the hits have mattered, all those concussions. It's just a career. It's like, wow, a great what if he did not have those concussion issues.
Saw Man on X chiming in. Q on a Tuesday morning. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Hey, Q, great point by Lloyd Vance. Andrew Illock retired early because he constantly got injured behind that O line. I pulled it up. 71 games, Q and Lloyd. He was sacked 157 times. Burrow has been sacked 201 times in the same amount of games. How much longer can he take this friggin' abuse? Wow. That's
Yeah,
a great stat right there.
yeah, and when you watch their games, you see him just getting pummeled. They had Whitworth there, and he went out to the Rams, and they've never been the same. Orlando Brown Jr. there, but he's a little past his prime, and that line has just not been good enough. And now with Mixon not being there, Brown is solid, but they're not taking any pressure off him with that rushing attack.
Sean chimes in, Q, loving the show on an AM. Hopefully, we catch you guys back in the saddle, as you say, regular time. Yeah, we got you, Shawnee. Check out these contract guys. Average salary, Baker Mayfield, who's undoubtedly better than two. It's not even close. Contract terms, 3 years, 100 million. Average salary, 33 million. Signing bonus, 28 million. GTD at sign, guaranteed 40 million. Total GTD, 50 million. Free agent 2027. Wow. I mean, it's a bargain if you think about it, right? I mean, Baker is kind of the opposite of the kind of quarterback Tua is. And I'm telling you right now, Baker Mayfield, I think, is uh, he's you might start to have him creep into that conversation. He's definitely playing top 10. I'm not ready to say top 5 because I think it's a prisoner of the moment. But man, that the numbers, they pay Tua a lot of money. And the expectation was they were going to compete in the AFC East and make a deep run, get to the AFC title game, get to a Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl with the team they have presently constructed. It's one of the reasons that they had the patience with a young head coach in McDaniel. But to your point, man, I, I just I don't know how much longer. Like, do you even can you envision a scenario where they bench him and go to Zach Wilson?
Ooh, that didn't. Well, when you say fall the money, no. You know what I mean? I think they're going to keep putting him out there. They paid that amount of money, but if it gets ugly, Q, where it's to the point, it's like this doesn't make sense to put him out there. Give Wilson a chance. He has that pedigree, et cetera. That's going to be interesting to watch, and their schedule's tough. So uh, they have a late bye,
Yep.
and they got to play Baltimore. They have to play Buffalo twice that we talked about. This is going to be a tough situation for him. And then when you talk about Hill not being happy, is it going to get toxic down there? Is he going to start, as a malcontent, yelling and screaming on the sidelines? And McDaniel has kind of lost control of the roster. It it's just not good for them, and I don't see it getting any better. And then when you talk about comparing those two quarterbacks, yeah, Baker, maybe you should start looking at the future bets in terms of him as MVP, because he's playing at a very high level at this point, and Tua's going in the opposite direction. And could he be like Kirk Cousins, a huge highest paid backup? So we'll see how he performs, but it's got to get better down in Miami.
Fish Fan 96 in North Miami chimes in, Q, enjoying the show. Do you think the Dolphins would entertain trading for Hill? I know they came out and said they wouldn't, but that could be a smokescreen. You know, is it also possible that teams want to steer clear of him and there's probably like a lack of interest because they know he's not the best locker room guy? So kind of answer the question, if you have lack of interest from teams and he's not going anywhere, um, I don't get it. Like, after a while, all the talent in the world, like it's like Beckham. Beckham turned around and made his comments about Eli, and they jettisoned him at Cleveland. Then Beckham turns around, he's talking about Cleveland, and we, can't win with this. Like, it's sometimes it's the player, it's not the quarterback, right?
Yeah, and the trade deadline's early November, so we'll see how this turns out. But it's yeah, if he's going to be a pain in the locker room, it's much like we talked about AB and To in the past. If you're not worth the squeeze and you're causing problems and no one can get along with you, yeah, jettison him. But the thing is, they may get pennies on a dollar for him. He's got that domestic violence thing kind of hanging over him, and others coaches around the league know all about his situation. How he kind of talked his way out of Kansas City. Is he worth what and he didn't have 1,000 yards last season, Q. He's not making those explosive plays like he used to. That first season you talk about in Miami, where McDaniel was a genius and he was running, he'll run all over the field. He's not making those plays. Maybe somebody, maybe Kansas City for the playoff push
I
when
was thinking that.
they bring him back. If this Rashee Rice thing kind of drags on and Worthy's not healthy enough, maybe they bring him back. Andy Reid is known to work with players that have issues. We'll see, but yeah, it's not going to get any better in Miami. I know that for sure.
Kevin from North Jersey, Giants fan, chimes in. Q, I'm glad you actually bring that up. Remember that Odell Beckham's father basically posted a video criticizing Mayfield for not throwing passes to his wide open, quote, son. And think about this. Everyone talked about he lost the locker room after Odell Beckham Jr. left. Now that's a bunch of garbage. It's right. I mean, Baker is just a gamer. Like, the dude just is a gamer. You want that dude in the foxhole. Like, if I'm going down the dark alley, dude, come with me. Because I know no matter what, you're going to throw. You're going to throw if I need you to throw. You're not running, right? And there's something to be said about that. And listen, sometimes we look at these diva wide receivers, man, and it's just, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
You know,
he
right?
has that moxie, and you're right, Q. These diva receivers that a lot of times teams don't need them to win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Everybody likes those fantasy football numbers and piling up the pinball machine numbers, but sometimes they're not worth the problems that they bring. So Hill, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in Miami and if he ends up someplace else.
All right. Lastly, game balls lack E for a week number 2 in the NFL. Well, we know you didn't give it to J.J. McCarthy. You know you didn't give it to Rodgers or Justin Fields. I know you didn't give it to Russell Wilson because obviously he threw that horrible pick in overtime. I didn't get to the offensive lineman. I would have cut that kid. Hudson, 4 penalties, 2 unnecessary roughness penalties, and then 2 false start penalties on the opening drive of a freaking game. And then he has a temper tantrum on the sideline. I would have cut his ass right there. I'm going to say,
And this is game ball, right?
yeah, this is game ball. Was it a quarterback?
Yes.
Jared Goff?
Yes, sir. Ding, ding, ding. That's what I gave it to. 23 to 28, 334 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, no interception. He even rushed the ball one time for 6 yards. I mean, it was just incredible the way he played. And you're just not sure who's going to show up week to week with him now. He had a tough week the week before, but this week he was in total control. And maybe he's getting on the same page with new offense coordinator there with the Lions. But as I said earlier, 25 first downs for the Lions. 52 points, 511 total yards. It was a total demolition of the Bears, and he was trigger man.
I mean, Lackey, you could have gave it to a lot. I have a feeling you're going to go. I don't even know if you tweeted these out. I because I never look at this stuff, and you don't tell me. But I'm going to. Is it the kid from Pittsburgh that let the ball bounce in the end zone? The returner?
Yeah, we are on point this morning, Q. I gave it to.
You have to. It changed the whole complexion of the game.
Back, Caleb Johnson, and you're screaming, "That's a live ball!" That. And I remember coaching my son and those kids when they're like 12 years old. You telling the kids, you got to cover that ball, son. And he just kind of walked away from it. And that was a huge turning point in that game against Seattle Seahawks. And the Steelers were heavy favorites at home, and they end up laying an egg, losing 31-17. And yeah, he's probably not going to get a lot of opportunities going forward, knowing Mike Tomlin.
Wow. Hey, did you see? I hate to be a downer, but my guy Robert Redford passed away.
Yeah, that was a shame. Me and my one buddy, we always watched The Natural.
He was he was in. I mean, he was an unbelievable actor, director, producer. There was a time where he kind of went the political, social injustice route. Remember, All the President's Men, and then there was Jeremiah Johnson was a classic. Brubaker was a classic. Now, everyone always reverts to The Natural because, yes, I believe The Natural is arguably the greatest sports movie of all time. That's just me. But I also believe, if you like I'm a movie guy, I'm a movie buff. The Sting is the greatest con movie ever. It is Paul Newman, Robert Redford. It's just an absolute classic. And like, I would encourage people, if you never saw The Sting, go watch it, because I remember I got the DVD years ago. My father was like, "Go watch this. You'll like it. You'll like it. You'll like it." And I was like, 73, which I thought the 70s was an unbelievable era for cinema, for movies. But the cast was just unbelievable. And of course, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, don't get me wrong. But you had Robert Redford, Charles Durning, Ray Walton, Robert Shaw, Paul Newman. It was just an unbelievable. Did you ever see The Sting?
Probably years ago,
Oh,
the $1 million movie on Channel 6 late at night.
oh, yeah, Saturday night movie.
So, man, I may have to rewatch that. Yeah, and he was a classic actor, and it's going to be a tough loss. I'll give you one. Downhill Racer. Did you ever see that with Robert Redford?
Downhill Racer.
Yeah,
Oh, what was that? Probably his early movies.
Yeah, he was a skier, and it was around Olympic level skier, and it was
Was
pretty
G
good.
Hackman in that?
I think he was. Yes, he was the coach.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to check that one out.
All right. And of course, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But there's another very, very underrated Robert Redford movie, and it was in 19. Oh man, what was it? It was 1970, 75. Watch 3 Days of the Condor.
Okay.
It's an accept. I mean, Sidney Pollack, God rest his soul, is an unbelievable director. Was an unbelievable director, but he is he's like a code breaker for the CIA. But it's a great movie. It's an unbelievable movie. I'm telling you this. Any movie he was in, I'd sit there, and even even at later, some of his movies, the movie The Castle with Gandolfini was a class. He was just a great actor. I'm telling you, him, Gene Hackman. Like, I was talking about Clint Eastwood the other day. Like, these guys, they're legendary. The Pacinos, the De Niros, right? They're so legendary. But The Natural is an all-time great, man. That scene when, Wilford Brimley's like, when he comes in there, he's like, "My daddy wanted me to be a ball player." Wilford Brimley's just like, you're the best player I've had, and you're the best goddamn hitter I've ever seen. Suit up. You're like, all right, here we go. Knock the cover off the ball, Hobbs.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
New York Knights. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, brother. Well, we're going to start wrapping it up. I always appreciate you joining me, and I know we had to work around a different schedule, but I definitely appreciate you swinging on by for a couple moments. Everyone give Lloyd a follow on X at Lloyd Mance. By the way, Lloyd and I are dropping a new edition of Back Your Play. Week 3 lines are out. We were just told that we'll be airing Saturdays and Sundays on NY48 WWO and a Roku. So I'll get you guys that information. And then, of course, Lloyd will join me back in the saddle on a Football Friday edition of On Cue, powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee, 3 Brooks Bourbon, and, of course, Get Ready with Tea. Always appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.
All right, there you have it. My guy, Lloyd Vance. Give him a follow. At Lloyd Vance does a phenomenal job with Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. We're going to start wrapping it up. An hour in the books. I mentioned rapid fire on this edition of On Cue on a Tuesday. Back in the saddle tomorrow in the 5 o'clock hour. We appreciate Lloyd with his gracious very time working with us scheduling-wise. We got some games to call. But as always, have a wonderful Sports Tuesday. We will talk to you tomorrow on a Wednesday edition of On Cue. Don't forget, get social with me at Rich Q on Q. And of course, TikTok, Rich Q on the mic. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Rich Q on Q. And we'll do it again on a Wednesday. Be safe, be sound. Hasta luego, mi día.